Ah, hello, dear friends. Today I have my hands on this lovely book, Greek Myths and Legends, an Usborne illustrated guide. What's particularly interesting I found about this is that it's a thrilling introduction to the characters and adventures that make up the Greek myths and can be used in particular as a source of inspiration for role-playing gamers. So it's presented in a really enjoyable style as a kind of primer to Greek myths and legends. And I'm a big fan of Greek myths and legends, so I thought we could go through this together. But before we start reading them, we might find this information useful. Basically, defining what a myth is, which is generally described as a story, which is the product of the imagination. However, they were obviously much more to the ancient Greeks, and how Greek authors wrote these stories and strange behaviour. The gods did many strange things in the myths, which the Greeks accepted in supernatural beings, although ordinary people would not have been allowed to do them. For instance, they often married very close members of their family, such as a sister or a mother. Yes, obviously not appropriate. We start with a lovely map of ancient Greece here. We've got Mount Olympus at the top, Mount Parnassus, Delphi, Thebes and Athens. We've got Ithaca here. That's where I went on my honeymoon. It's now Santorini. But the myth behind Ithaca here is that the crater, the caldera that it is formed around, which is now sea, is potentially the lost city of Atlantis, is what has sunk into the sea there. Which is of course not the case, but would be lovely if that were true. You've got Sparta down here, Seriphos, Naxos, Delos, the Ionian islands there. We've got a little bit of a primer on religion. We've got here a Greek comic actor. You can tell he's a comic actor because his head is stuck in a ladder. That's how you tell instantly that they're a comic actor. We've got cults and temples and all sorts. Got a bit of a timeline here. 6000 to 2200 BC were farmers. The Minoans in 2200 to 1400 BC. Invasion from the north disrupted the process of progress and advancement, and the island of Crete escaped invasion, and a sophisticated civilization grew up called Minoan after one of its kings, Minos, and lots of works of art survive. The Mycenaeans and the Dark Ages. But let's get into the myths. The creation. Lovely illustration here. And before everything started, we had chaos, of course, just a dark nothingness. And gradually Mother Earth emerged and formed the world, and her son Uranus was the sky, and then had children with the mother. So Uranus and Mother Earth had children together. Interesting dynamic to start everything from. Rain fell from the sky, making plants grow, and strangely shaped animals and monsters and giants were born. You had Cyclops. Uranus treated them cruelly and banished them to the underworld. And then some human-shaped giants called Titans were born, who became the first gods and goddesses. And then finally, Mother Earth gave birth to the golden race, who lived in an age without trouble or wars. Then they had no children, so that race died, though their spirits lingered on to help and protect people. But the Titans revolted. Mother Earth couldn't forget Uranus for his treatment of her first children, and encouraged the Titans led by Kronos to rebel, and overcame Uranus with a sickle and took power. Then 3 drops of Uranus's blood fell on the earth and formed the Erinyes, or Furies, and spirits of revenge with dog's head and bat's wings. Ooh. And then another drop fell in the sea, creating foam, and then Aphrodite was born. And then we have the birth of Zeus, one of the biggest figures in myths and so he swallowed each one as it was born. It's not really birthing etiquette, is it? And to save her sixth child, Rhea tricked Kronos into swallowing a stone wrapped in baby's clothes and hid the real child amongst some lesser goddesses called nymphs who brought him up safely, and that was Zeus. So he luckily survived a dangerous father. Then Zeus got his own back by slipping a potion into Kronos' drink, making him choke, and the children he swallowed were coughed out, whole and safe. So it's nice that that story has a happy ending there. Hestia, Demeter and Hera, and sons Pluto and Poseidon. And then a big old battle took place. So most of the Titans and giants sided with Kronos, and then the other gods, and the new gods and younger gods were victorious, and the Titans were banished, and one of them called Atlas was made to hold up the heavens as punishment. And that is how Zeus then became ruler of all. So we then have how the world was divided up into Earth and the Underworld, Olympus, the ocean, the Styx, the Elysian fields. Earth was obviously where we all live, and the Underworld is where Zeus's brother Pluto ruled the Underworld, or Hades. Everyone went there when they died, and there were three parts. So you had the ordinary one, where we wandered around the asphodel fields as shades. We were shadowy versions of our earthly selves. Tartarus was a place of punishment for really evil people. Fire and brimstone, as we can see here. And then exceptionally good or heroic people were reserved a place in the Elysian fields. This was a golden, blissful place of rest. You could actually be sent back to Earth to live another life, but if you earned a place in the Elysian fields 3 times, you were allowed to go to the Isles of the Blessed and never had to leave. So interesting, you almost had a membership system to parts of the Underworld. Obviously giving you rules for living and ways to live your life. And then of course we had Olympus, where the gods lived. We had the ocean, where Poseidon ruled, and the Styx, the river that you had to cross to enter the Underworld, and you had to pay the boatman, Charon, 1 obol, to ferry you across. Going to learn more about individual gods and goddesses now. Starting off with Aphrodite. So we mentioned before how she was born from the foam of a drop of blood from Uranus. The Greek pronunciation, I'm aware, is very different to how an English pronunciation. I think the English pronunciation of these words would put an additional stress on the second syllable of a word, so it would be Uranus for an English pronunciation, but I think there are even stresses for Greek, so it would be Uranus, I think. Please do correct me in the comments if I've got that incorrect. But Aphrodite was carried in a giant scallop shell to the shores of Cyprus, where she was met by the seasons in the form of beautiful girls who gave her clothes and jewels to wear. So we know she's the goddess of love, and she existed purely to be beautiful and adored, had no other duties, as most of the other immortals did, and she had a magic girdle which made whoever wore it irresistibly attractive to other people. And then it could have been because of that Adonis or Paris preferred Aphrodite even to other goddesses. She got married to Zeus's son Hephaestus, who was the smith god, strong but coarse and born lame, and he made weapons. She wasn't very happy with that choice and had many lovers. Poor Hephaestus. And the most famous of Aphrodite's lovers among the gods was Ares, the god of war. Hephaestus did not like his wife's behaviour and decided to teach her a lesson, and forged a net of bronze links and hung it above her bed, and when the lovers were next to together, he dropped the net over them and caught them like fish. And he called the other gods to come and see how ridiculous they looked. He forgave Aphrodite, though, as she was so beautiful that he could not be angry with her for long. She can get away with a lot, I suppose. And then we also had Adonis, being a handsome human who was the object of affection for both Aphrodite and Persephone. He preferred Aphrodite, and Persephone was jealous, so she told Ares that Aphrodite loved an ordinary man more than himself, and Ares was furious, turned into a boar, chased Adonis and gored him to death where his blood fell, and the first anemones grew. And that's when Adonis was sent to the Underworld, where Persephone was queen, and Aphrodite begged Zeus to let him come back to her, and granted a compromise. He had to stay in the Underworld during the winter, but in the summer he could visit the earth and be with Aphrodite. Probably more trouble than it's worth. I bet he wondered what he got himself into. But she couldn't have been crossed, Aphrodite, because a man named Glaucus insulted her, and the night before he was due to take part in a chariot race, she gave his horses water from her sacred well and fed them a magic herb. And when the race started the next day, the horses went mad and crashed the chariot, killing Glaucus. Then they ate the former master. But if you were a faithful follower of Aphrodite, you got rewarded. So Pygmalion was a sculptor who worshipped Aphrodite but couldn't find a suitable wife. So he decided to create a statue of his ideal woman, and it was such a success that he fell in love with it, even though he knew that was hopeless. So Aphrodite felt sorry for him and brought it to life. Pygmalion named her Galatea, and they were happily married. And Aphrodite's children were Eros. One of her sons was Eros, who of course we know as Cupid, who would mischievously make people fall in love with each other by piercing their hearts with golden arrows, but would often make weird matches for his own amusement. And we also had Harmonia, who brought back peace and harmony after the war so that love could triumph, and Aphrodite could come back. And Aphrodite's son by a human was called Anchises, who became the hero Aeneas, who was famous for his exploits in the Trojan War, that we can find out about later. We have here the goddess Athena. She was the virgin goddess of wisdom and war, and oversaw the safety of the state, and was the most important goddess after Hera. So she was born because Zeus fell in love with Metis, the Titaness of wisdom. Was expecting his baby when Zeus heard a prophecy that any child Metis had would be greater than its father. There seems to be a running theme of fathers hearing prophecies of their children, outperforming them and becoming wildly jealous. I wonder if there was a general patriarchal insecurity in Greek society. Zeus couldn't permit it, so turned Metis into a fly and swallowed her. Oh dear. And that's how he gained his great wisdom. When he was walking by Lake Triton in Libya, he developed a terrible headache and ordered Hephaestus to crack his skull open, which the smith god did, as he knew he couldn't harm an immortal, and from the split appeared a female figure in full armour. Zeus introduced her as his daughter Athena. So she inherited her mother's wisdom and preferred to settle disputes by reasoning, and if she was forced to fight, she was as invincible as a goddess of war. She took care of Zeus's shield, the Aegis, and other battle gear. The owl was her special bird, and she was patroness of the olive crop and of the capital city of Greece. She had a great friend called Pallas, and one day they were practicing with their spears, and Athena killed her friend by accident, and to show her sorrow she put her friend's name before her own, and was often known as Pallas Athena. She apparently invented the flute, first played it at a banquet of the gods. Everyone liked it apart from Hera, and Aphrodite wouldn't stop giggling, so she was puzzled until she glimpsed her reflection in a pool, and Sue saw what they found funny, because to play the flute she had to puff her cheeks up, which looked silly. She cursed the flute and threw it away. Oh dear. Naughty sisters. Nothing wrong with playing the flute. Of course, Athens is named after her because her and Poseidon quarrelled over the naming of the greatest town in Greece, and at last they agreed that whoever gave the town the best gift should also named it. So Poseidon dug his trident into the rock on which the town stood, and out gushed a stream, giving access to the sea, so it became rich and powerful through trade. And Athena created the olive tree as her gift. It provided food and oil for the inhabitants and made them rich through exports, so it was judged the better gift, and the town was named Athens after her. A special shrine was built to her on the Acropolis, the hill above Athens, and it was called the Parthenon, from the word Parthenos, meaning maiden, which was another of Athena's titles. Perseus accidentally came across Athena in her bath, and she blinded him for daring to look at her. Poor Dionysus. Hopefully it was just an accident, but she made up for that hasty action by giving him the gift of seeing the future, and he advised Oedipus and Odysseus, so he became a prophet in a way. We have Apollo and Artemis, who are the twin children of Zeus and the Titaness Leto. Artemis was the goddess of the moon and hunting and protected wild animals, and Apollo was the sun god and patron of the arts, and the raven was his special bird, both associated with woodland. So here Zeus tried to keep his affair with Leto a secret, but Hera was not fooled, and she sent a giant snake, Python, after poor Leto, who ran until she collapsed. It's obviously not a good idea to get into bed with Zeus here, is it? The south wind then lifted her over to the island of Ortygia. There Artemis was born, and she grew up instantly and helped Leto across to the island of Delos, where she gave birth to Apollo. So they believed the sun and moon were drawn across the sky in chariots. The sun was drawn by Apollo's golden horses, and the moon by Artemis's silver stags. It's very similar myths across the board. I think in Norse mythology you have the wolves, as it Hati and Skull, that chase after the moon and sun respectively, and that's what makes them go all around. Apollo actually tamed the 9 muses, who were wild goddesses who inspired artists and became gods of the arts. He loved music and played the lyre. And he pursued a nymph called Daphne, who did not want his attentions, ran away, praying to Mother Earth to save her. Just as Apollo caught her, her prayers were answered, and she was turned into a laurel tree. Apollo wore a wreath of laurel leaves in her memory. I mean, if somebody is trying so hard to get away with you that they'd rather become an inanimate tree, I think you have to reevaluate your principles. There was a music contest, the Satyr Marsyas, who you can find out about later, claimed to be a better musician than Apollo. So the god suggested a competition. Marsyas played a flute he had found, not knowing it was the one Athena had cast. Remember that one? Puffed cheeks. They played equally well until Apollo challenged Marsyas to play his instrument upside down and sing at the same time. This was possible with a lyre, but not with a flute, so Marsyas lost, and the price of losing was death, and Apollo killed Marsyas. Should have thought that challenge through. Artemis and Agamemnon. Artemis was angry with King Agamemnon because they was preparing to send an army against Troy. She would send contrary winds so he could not set sail, and demanded the sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia to appease her. Agamemnon was about to obey when Artemis snatched the girl and put a deer in her place. Iphigenia was taken to safety and became a priestess of Artemis. Dionysus and Hermes. Zeus was an indulgent father even when his children misbehaved. And Hermes and Dionysus were both sons of his whose behaviour was not always godlike. Of course, we associate Dionysus with wine and frivolity. He was born because his mother was a princess called Semele, daughter of King Cadmus of Thebes. Zeus visited her in disguise, and her family did not believe her lover was a god, so they persuaded Semele to ask Zeus to prove his identity by appearing as his real self. He was reluctant, but gave in, and appeared as a blazing figure with thunder and lightning crackling around him. Semele was killed instantly, as no human can look at the glory of a god and survive, oh dear. But he was able to save the baby that Semele was expecting, however, and this was Dionysus. Hera heard about Zeus's new son and ordered the Titans to tear the baby apart, and they obeyed, but the Titaness Rhea, Zeus's mother, and Dionysus' grandmother put him back together again and brought him back to life. A bit of a traumatic birth. He was mischievous and put in the care of Silenus, who was one of the many lesser deities who lived on Earth. Had a reputation as a fun-loving and irresponsible. Grew up rather wild. They travelled the world making merry, accompanied by several strange creatures known as satyrs, who knew the secret of making wine from grapes. Dionysus taught the skill to people wherever he went, sharing the gift of wine. So they walked around drunk, mostly. Hermes was the son of Zeus and the Titaness Maya. He soon got a reputation for mischief, and and when it was only a few days old, he stole some cattle belonging to Apollo and covered their hooves with bark so it would leave no tracks and hid them away. He was the messenger of the gods, because Zeus was amused by the exploits of Hermes, but could not allow them to continue, and decided Hermes must have a task to keep him out of trouble, and made him the messenger of the gods, and patron of travellers. Zeus gave him a winged helmet and sandals so he could travel faster. Since he bargained so well with Apollo, he became god of trade and treaties, and because the incident with Apollo's cattle, thieves and liars prayed to him, hoping for sympathy. He's apparently supposed to have invented the alphabet, boxing and gymnastics too. Very prolific god. Now we have the Titan Prometheus, who was wise and thoughtful. His name actually means forethought, which suited him well, and took the side of Zeus in the war against Kronos, so he wasn't banished. But he is supposed to have created the human race, because the first people on Earth were the golden race, and they disappeared as they had no children, so Zeus replaced them with the silver race. But they started to do all sorts of evil things, so Zeus imprisoned them in Tartarus. Discouraged, he asked Prometheus to try his hand at making a race to live on Earth. So the Titan had the idea of making mortals that looked like the gods, so that God and humans could understand each other better. This was the bronze race. Underworld and Earth, the gold and silver races looked like them. So the trick was, Prometheus was fond of the people he created and helped them whenever he could. There was a quarrel about which part of a sacrifice should be dedicated to Zeus. So Prometheus found a way of settling it in mankind's favour. He divided a sacrificed bull into 2 bags, and in one he put the bones with a few bits of nice meat on top, but in the other he put the rest of the meat, covered with the unappetizing stomach. He asked Zeus to choose which one he wants, and naturally Zeus chose the one that looked nicest. And then the rest was given to people to eat. Zeus was furious, though he couldn't alter his choice, and as punishment he refused to let humans have fire, the gift he had intended for them, so they shivered in the dark and ate raw meat. But, as we know, Prometheus felt very sorry for mankind, and with the aid of Athena, his faithful pupil and friend, he stole some fire from Zeus's palace, and showed people how to use it. They could then cook and make metal tools. And then when Zeus found out what Prometheus had done, it was too late to take the fire away, so he punished him horribly, bound to a rock with unbreakable chains, and ordered an eagle to rip out his liver. Despite the pain, Prometheus couldn't die as he was immortal, and his liver was renewed every night, and the torture was started again every morning. But then, many centuries later, Zeus allowed Prometheus to be rescued by Heracles. We have a similar myth here to the Noah's Ark flood of Christianity, with Zeus becoming more and more displeased with mankind. A family tried to feed him human flesh and decided people had become so wicked that they didn't deserve to live, and sent a great flood to drown them. But Prometheus interfered again, warning an earthly king of the coming flood. His son, Deucalion, and his wife Thera built a boat and survived the flood, which lasted 9 days and nights, and when the water subsided, the boat landed safely on Mount Parnassus. And then Zeus had begun to regret destroying the whole human race, and was glad when he found out that those 2 had survived. So he sent the Titaness Themis to help them. Throwing stones over their shoulders without looking back, they walked around, and then those stones turned into human beings again. So the race started. Oh, we've got Pandora there. He asked Hephaestus to shape a woman in his forge, and the king of the gods breathed life into her and sent her to Prometheus' brother Epimetheus. He gave her a jar which he strictly forbade her to open to take with her. Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept anything from Zeus, but Epimetheus welcomed the visitor and finally married her. She was called Pandora. She was very lovely, but inquisitive. I don't know why that's a counterpoint. Lovely, but inquisitive. Lovely and inquisitive is fine there. She longed to know what was in Zeus's jar, and then she looked in it, and out flew all the evils that had plagued the world. As Pandora shaked in horror, stared in horror at the empty jar, one last thing emerged. It was hope, and it meant that people should never despair. Here we have Zeus's lovers, of which we have, of course, many. He was married to Hera, but unfortunately fell in love with many other women, and many of the children from these affairs became heroes or rulers. So we have Io, who turned her into a white cow to hide her from his wife. What a bargain. Hera found out and tethered Io, leaving her 100-eyed servant Argus on guard. Zeus sent Hermes to soothe Argus to sleep by playing his lyre, and one by one Argus closed all his eyes, and Hermes swiftly struck off his head and freed Io. Hera was furious and sent a gadfly to sting her rival. The insect chased Io all the way to Egypt. Here she became a woman again, and a priestess of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Europa of Tyre was on the beach when Zeus appeared disguised as a white bull. She was afraid at first, but the bull was so handsome and gentle that she soon started to play and garnered him with flowers, and they even got on his back for a ride. And then the bull plunged into the sea and carried her off to Crete, where she lived and had 3 sons with Zeus, and later married the king of Crete, who made her eldest son Minos his heir. He's a good old charmer, isn't he, turning into animals? Danae, King Acrisius, was warned by an oracle that he would be killed by his grandson, and locked his daughter, Danae, in a tower, so she could never marry and have children. He couldn't keep her from Zeus, though, so he entered her prison as a shower of gold, and Danae had his son Perseus. Acrisius could not bear to kill them despite the oracle, so he sent them adrift in a boat. Alcmene was already married when Zeus fell in love with her, and she refused to betray her husband, so the god played a trick on her, the rogue. Zeus disguised himself as Alcmene's husband and went to her just when he was due back from war. She greeted Zeus fondly and had shock when her real husband arrived next day. The couple guessed the truth but could do nothing about it. Alcmene had Zeus's son and called him Heracles. The birth of Hercules. And to appease Zeus's wife, this did not work, and Hera made Heracles' life extremely difficult. Leda was the queen of Sparta, married to King Tyndareus. One day she was bathing in a stream when a handsome swan swam up. The swan was Zeus in disguise. He became Leda's lover, and she produced a beautiful blue egg. I mean, this is a very sanitary version of this story. I think it's very NSFW, the way that swan loved Leda. But 4 children, 2 belonged to Zeus and 2 to her husband. Zeus's children were Helen, the most beautiful woman on earth, for whom the Trojan War was fought, and the hero Dionysus, and the children of Tyndareus were Clytemnestra and Castor. And then we have Thetis, a Nereid, a sea goddess who could change shape at will, and it was predicted that her son would be greater than its father again. Zeus was in love with her but couldn't risk having such a son, so decided she had to marry a mortal, Peleus, although he knew she would resist. Peleus found Thetis on the seashore and seized her. She changed shape from a woman to fire, water, lion, serpent, and cuttlefish. But Peleus held on. His courage impressed Thetis, and she agreed to marry him. All the gods were invited to their wedding except Eris, the goddess of spite. She got her revenge, as we can see later. Then we have Perseus. Look at this image here. Ooh. What's that? Is it a wicked woman? We'll find out. I think it's Medusa. It is Medusa, of course, it's Medusa. Look at all the snakes. Perseus and his mother Danae landed on the island of Seriphos and were looked after by King Polydectes. Later he tried to persuade Danae to marry him. She refused, and he felt that he might change her mind if her son went away, so he teased Perseus for preferring his mother's company by doing brave deeds like other young men. He said Perseus should prove his courage by killing Medusa the Gorgon, and of course this is where Perseus goes on a quest, and he had to fight her with magic weapons. He used his shield to see her reflection, not look her in the eye directly. He met Andromeda on the way home, a beautiful princess chained to a rock, and her parents boasted she was lovelier than the Nereid, so Poseidon had flooded their land, so to appease him Andromeda was to be sacrificed to a sea monster, but Perseus waited for the monster and killed it, then freed Andromeda and married her. When they returned to Seriphos, Polydectes was about to force Danae into marriage, but outraged Perseus held up Medusa's head. The king looked at it and was turned to stone. He got his comeuppance. Here are some wicked women that we'll end on for this part. Phaedra, the second wife of the hero Theseus, jealous of Hippolytus. Theseus' son was his wife and made up a story that Hippolytus had attacked her. Theseus was appalled and asked Poseidon to punish his son. As Hippolytus drove his chariot along the beach, Poseidon sent a huge wave which scared his horses, making them bolt. There was a terrific crash, and Hippolytus was killed. When Theseus learnt that Phaedra had lied, she hanged herself to escape his anger. Ino here, King Athena had 2 children, Phrixus and Helle. Their mother was Nephele, the cloud woman. The king abandoned Nephele to marry Ino. Ino hated his children and plotted against them. Ino lit a fire under the grain store, which dried the seed up so it wouldn't grow. The crops failed and the people starved. Athena sent to the oracle at Delphi to ask what to do. Ino bribed the messenger to say the oracle's advice was to sacrifice his son. Athena sadly prepared to kill Phrixus, but Hera sent a golden ram to rescue him and Hela. She also made Athena so angry that he forced Ino to jump off a cliff and drown. The ram flew east, but it crossed from Europe to Asia. Hela fell from its back and drowned. The sea was called the Hellespont, Sea of Hela, after her. Phrixus landed in Colchis and sacrificed the ram to Zeus in thanks, and its fleece became the object of a great quest. Of course, the Golden Fleece that we all know of in Jason and the Argonauts. I think that's a good point to rest at this part for today, and I look forward to having you join me next time for more Greek